Good evening and welcome to Newton Talk. My name is Jackie Morrissey, and tonight's very distinguished guest is Earl Henry Sholley. He's a candidate for Congress and the fourth...
It's a pleasure, Jackie.
Thank you. It's a candidate for Congress in the 4th Congressional District. He's a challenging Barney Frank. Nice to meet you, sir.
Well, it's my pleasure, and it's nice to be here, and I thank you for inviting me.
Well, it was tough getting a hold of you.
Well, we're busy running a campaign.
Well, how is the campaign going?
Well, we're very optimistic about our chances. We think that the incumbent has... We feel that he's not reflective of the values and priorities of the people in his district, and we think that he's right at the center of this financial meltdown that we're experiencing. These are difficult times that we're going through, and Mr. Frank has a lot of questions to answer, quite frankly.
What's your
Excuse the pun.
Yeah. give us a little bit of your background.
Well, I've had a business for many years, had a family, married for 25 years. I'm a widower, lost my wife to cancer about 3.5 years ago. Have 2 wonderful daughters. One lives in Seattle, Washington. She's a capital fundraiser for a nonprofit organization, healthcare organization in Seattle. In fact, they're a model for the country. And the other daughter is a CPA. She's a graduate of Northeastern University, and she just recently married to a former pilot in the Royal Air Force. He's a New Zealander, and they're now living in New Zealand. Run a business. I know what it's like to meet payroll and pay all those taxes that we're forced to pay every week. And you know, I've dealt with people, and my philosophy is to get the work done.
Well, let me ask you, what kind of business were you in?
I was a landscaper for many years. I sold it to my partners. I'm doing a little subcontracting work for them right now.
How is landscaping going to help you in the Congress of the United States?
Well, I have dirt under my fingers. I work hard, and you know, I think we need somebody with 2 feet on the ground to go down there to Washington to straighten out that mess. Unfortunately, in this country, Jackie, we've created a class of professional career politicians, and they should be down. Philosophy is do a good job and get there for the public good, but unfortunately too many of them are down there for their own personal enrichment. I think we need to get back to the concept of citizen legislator, where people put in 1 or 2 terms of public service and then they move on. And I think we would be much better served as a community, state, and country if people followed that concept when they went to vote every 2 years or every 4 years. But as a landscaper, I think I bring certain things. I bring a lot of common sense. I know how to get the job done. I know how to sift through problems. I would also bring my pruning shears, and I would implement the 4 Ds of pruning.
What are the 4 Ds of pruning?
Well, the 4 Ds of pruning are, and by the way, I learned these at UMass Amherst, where I got my 2nd degree in plant soil sciences. The 4 Ds of pruning are dead, damaged, diseased, and my personal favorite, which is very apropos for the Congress, deranged.
Wow, that's good. That's good. So, what are your issues? What's your main issue?
Well, you know, a few weeks ago, I think it would have been gas, the price of gas. But who's talking about oil or gas these days? They're talking about the meltdown and the so-called crisis in Washington, and now the bailout. People are wondering what to do. It looks like the Senate is going to vote tonight to do the bailout. In the House of Representatives, it was a very close vote, but it failed 225 to 208, I believe. It was quite an eclectic cast of characters who voted against it. We had some of the Democrats who voted against it, some who voted for it. It's amazing because usually the Massachusetts delegation typically on the same page, but this time that wasn't the case. Mr. Frank voted for it. I have, so far, I haven't seen anything that would lead me to believe that it's a good thing for the taxpayers. I think we rushed into this. We can't afford this. We need a balanced budget in this country. We need to stop spending money like there's no tomorrow. I think You know, and there's an easy answer. We can solve this problem overnight. You know what we need to do? If we got rid of the capital gains tax in this country, eliminated it, even if it's only for 2 years, do you know how much money will come back into the stock market?
People don't understand that. They don't understand.
Well, I'm telling you, with 50% of the people in this country invested in the stock market through pensions, through IRAs, and other vehicles, believe me, that this will have a great impact. Cut federal spending. Let's cut out some of these agencies that were created within the last 30 years. You know, let's stop spending more money. A business can't survive. If you're running a business and you spend more money than you take in, you won't last very long. But see, the government is able to do that. It's time to stop. You know, the majority leader said, we're sending a message to Wall Street that the party is over. Well, when is the party going to be over for Congress, Jackie? That's what I want to know.
Hey, we have a caller. Good evening, caller. Hello.
Good evening, Jack. How are you?
Good.
I'd like to propose a question to your guest. As far as the war in Iraq is concerned, and the billions of dollars we're spending there monthly, how do you feel about our involvement in Iraq? Do you go with the status quo with the administration? Or do you go along with the Democratic view that we should set a timetable and remove ourselves and our involvement from Iraq?
Well, thank you for calling in, sir, and I appreciate your question. If you can see my bumper sticker right here on the table in front of Jackie, you'll see that it says the status quo must go. I think it's time to get away from doing business as usual. We need to make some great changes in Washington. However, I also believe that we do have a concern. It's a dangerous world that we live in, and I believe that what we need to do in Iraq and in Afghanistan is, once those situations are stabilized, we need to get out of those countries. We need to pull our troops back to America. There are certain strategic areas where we need to remain. But my philosophy is fix America first. I think it's time that we stop being policemen to the world, and we need to bring our troops back home. And there are a lot of things in this country that need repairing. We have an infrastructure in this country that's falling apart, and we need to take care of those things. And I hope I answered your question adequately.
There's something here that you didn't mention in your resume, so to speak. You're a veteran.
I am a veteran.
Yeah, a Vietnam era veteran. All right, so that's important. That's important that people understand that.
Well, it is. I served my country, and I was proud to do that. Both my brother and mother worked for the U.S. Army as civilian employees. They had supervisory positions. My brother was a management, budget management analyst. And my father, at the age of 16, fought in World War II.
Well, now let me ask you something else. With energy, now you say it's not the main issue anymore.
Well, but energy is still an important issue, and I think it is a disgrace that we did not develop an energy policy 20 years ago. If you look at Canada, they decided that they were going to implement an energy policy. They moved ahead. Right now, they're the biggest supplier of oil to the United States. We have just as much energy. When Barack Obama says that we only have 3% of the world's oil reserves, that is patently false. We have much more oil than that. We have more oil in shale formations in 3 western states than they have in the entire Middle East. We have oil. We need to drill Anwar. I believe in the environment. I have a degree in plant soil sciences. I'm one of those guys who talks to flowers. I love plants. I love the environment. I'm a member of the Appalachian Mountain Club. I was an Eagle Scout. You know, my whole life I was learning to treat the environment as a steward, you know, that it's something that's precious and that's given to us. But listen, we have to enact policies that show a little common sense. We have extremists on both sides of this issue who it's either their way or the highway. We have to show some common sense. We have a lot of natural resources in this country that need to be developed. Canada did that, and their dollar has appreciated. It's almost on a par with the U.S. dollar right now. They're our biggest supplier of oil. Saudi Arabia is number 2. We could be doing the same things that they've been doing. We should be developing nuclear. We have wind technology. We have alternative sources of energy. But we need to, the full panoply of energy sources that we have at our command, we should be working on them and developing them.
Another issue that was very popular, it seems as though it's lost its interest, is immigration. How do you feel about the immigration laws, illegal immigration?
Well, I like to make a difference between legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. Let's face it, Jackie, we're all, unless you're Native American Indian 100%, your ancestors came here from somewhere else. And, you know, that I don't mind. I mean, it's a nation of immigrants. It's what makes this country great, I think. It's referred to as a melting pot. But they came here legally, they had sponsors, they learned the language, they sent their kids to school, and you know, in many cases they didn't even teach them the native language because they wanted them to learn English. They wanted them to become part of this great social experiment, this shining city on the hill. And we're not doing that anymore. We're getting to the point where we're balkanizing our country. I feel that if you want to be a sovereign nation, you have to be able to control your borders. Look, they tell me that a third of the people in prison now are illegal immigrants who come here to commit crime because America is ripe for the picking. And we need to do something about that. If people want to come here, let them come here through legal channels. There are a lot of people out there, this is a very important issue to them.
Let me ask you, some of the, you talk a lot about the influencing peddling in Washington earlier before we went on the show.
It's scandalous. It's a disgrace.
How do you stop something like that? I mean, you've got lobbyists, you've got special interests.
You know how if I am elected, I will go to Congress and I will make one of the first laws that I will propose is that anyone sitting on a committee cannot accept money from any industry that they're supposed to be regulating or policing. For example, my opponent, Mr. Frank, sits on the House Financial Services Committee. Prior to that, it was the Banking Committee, where he was the ranking member. He's been on that committee since 1981. Typically, a Democrat gets 70% of his money from the unions, union workers. And by the way, my father was a union worker. He was a steel worker. He worked in the mines in Pennsylvania, in the ore mines. He was a union officer, strong unionist. And I believe in collective bargaining. Although I do think the unions have gotten too powerful and they've gotten too much involved in the political process, and I don't think that's a good thing for America, because at some point I think we have to remember that we're not Republicans, we're not Democrats, we're not unions or we're not union or non-union, we're Americans, we're all Americans. But if we did that, Mr. Frank gets 70% of his money from the same industries that he's supposed to be regulating. I'm talking the insurance industry, the investment banks, the banking industry, commercial banks. We're talking about law firms. We're talking about securities brokerage firms on Wall Street. That's where he gets 70% of his money. He was in the top 5. He got over $40,000 from Fannie Mae. They doled out over $200 million over a 10-year period in lobbying money. The influence of lobbyists is out of control in Washington. I believe that we shouldn't accept that congressmen shouldn't accept pork. There shouldn't be special projects. I think everybody should look at them. They should go before a committee and decide whether it's a good project and it's beneficial to the people of the United States and not just people in a particular district.
You know, another issue that concerned me about Barney, and I follow his record pretty close, was the Amber Alert bill.
Right.
The protected, he voted against that.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I still, when I hear that, I still shake my head because it's hard to believe why he would do that. In fact, it's my understanding that the vote in the U.S. Senate was 98-0. It was unanimous. The vote in the House of Representatives was 400-25. And Mr. Frank was 5. And Mr. Frank was one of the 25. In fact, he was one of the only members of the Massachusetts delegation. John Kerry was not present to vote, but Barney Frank was the only member of the delegation to vote against the Amber Alert bill.
Ted Kennedy voted for it?
Ted Kennedy voted for the Amber Alert bill.
I don't understand that. I can't understand why he voted against that.
Well, I believe the reason that Mr. Frank gave is that he thought the penalties were too severe for pedophiles and child pornographers. And again, I think that speaks to what I said earlier, that he's out of touch with his constituents.
Well, not only is he out of touch, but the press never made an issue of that. That was a very popular issue when it was in the legislature, you know, coming up for a vote. Wendy Murphy here in Massachusetts was big behind it, and there was a lot of publicity, and I never heard anything said about his voting against it.
Well, but don't you know, Barney Frank is the smartest and funniest guy in Congress. Isn't that what the press says about it?
That's what they say, yeah. That's what they say. You know, it's almost like even myself, and I don't have too much respect for the man. I'm almost hesitant to talk about him in the content that I know what he's about. Do you know what I mean? Because I think this political correctness has polluted our.
Well, it has. I think it's intimidated a lot of people from speaking out.
Because I could say a lot of things about Barney Frank, and I know a lot of things about him. Yeah. I've been following his career.
See, I've never been intimidated by political correctness.
But see, the thing is, I'm in business, and I have a lot of clients that really, you know, make me aware of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, and they're offended by it. And they use the political correctness as the reason. You shouldn't be saying that. I hear this constantly, and it's upsetting to me.
Sure. Well, you know, when people go after me, I can always tell them, look, you know, somebody says, well, that, like somebody mentioned he had some comments to make about my position on illegal immigration or immigration. And, you know, he was hoping that I wasn't being racist about it. And I said, hey, you know, I was a race relations equal opportunity specialist. My wife was a graduate of T.C. Williams High School. The Titans was the movie that they made about it. It was the first fully integrated high school in America. She was president of the YWCA. She was there in Washington when Martin Luther King spoke. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter to me. I speak the truth. I think it's important for people to speak their mind. If they have something to say, they should say it and not take the long way around the barn and not be intimidated by political correctness.
Well, the reason I bring this up, a lot of people don't really know Barney Frank because of political correctness, because you can't say a lot of things about him that should be said. Well, for an example, why does a guy vote against this bill, the Amber Alert bill? Now, I mean, that's mind-boggling to me. You know, that's one issue. A lot of other, do you know any other radical votes that he's made?
Well, again, over the question of immigration, there was the Frank Amendment, which actually it handcuffed the authorities and the immigration officials. It watered down the existing law that anyone who had any connections to a terrorist organization was not allowed into the United States. They were prohibited from entry into the United States. He changed that. And now the officials have to prove that they actually were engaged in an act of terrorism. So he watered down the law. In fact, it was responsible for many of these individuals, the perpetrators of 9/11. Many of them were here in this country on student visas. Because of the Frank Amendment, they were able to come into the country when a number of years before they would have been prohibited from doing so.
What about,
and he was responsible for that. And again, he had some other things that he was pursuing because he wanted to also weaken the laws and allow other groups, and I won't get into particular groups, but it was special group rights that he was pushing when he did this, to allow other people to come into the country as well.
What about Homeland Security? He's been very, very weak in that too, as far as...
Mr. Frank, we're like night and day. I mean, he's really, I view the way that he votes, and he's a member of the Progressive Caucus. The Progressive Caucus in Washington was founded, has about 60-some members. It's the biggest caucus within the Democratic Party. It was founded by Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Barney Frank, these people are hardcore left-wing socialists. They don't like the free enterprise system. They don't like capitalism.
No,
they want to grow government.
Now, this may not be politically, but they're almost anti-American.
They are.
They're anti-American.
You know, even on the question of Israel, Barney Frank voted to give money to the Palestinian Authority. The nation of Israel is very much against that. There are many Jewish organizations in America that are against that, because by giving them that money, it takes away some of the strength in negotiations that the Israelis have. And Barney Frank voted for giving direct aid. You know, they wanted the aid. They don't mind. You know, Israel doesn't object to the aid. What they object to is the direct aid. They want the aid to go with strings attached. They want them to end, you know, their terrorist activities. And I think that's a reasonable attitude to have for a country that is on the verge of extinction, because it has so many enemies around it, including Iran, who want to annihilate the state of Israel.
No, it doesn't make any sense to me, but you never hear about these things. I mean, here is probably the second largest Jewish population is in your district, in the country. You don't hear a peep about it.
He has a lot of friends in the press.
Well,
there's a strong organization. They have a great website. These people are doing a lot of good work. They're staunch friends of Israel. It's the Republican Jewish Coalition, the RJC. They do amazing work.
What's their website like?
They're one of the most effective lobbying organizations in the country.
What about this ACON organization? Now all of a sudden it's become known.
Well, ACORN is the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. It's considered to be the most radical organization and the largest radical organization in America. It's an offshoot of two radical 60s organizations, again, leftist organizations who want to bring down the entire free enterprise system of the United States of America. They've been getting, Barack Obama was a trainer for ACORN. In fact, the chapter in Chicago is considered to be the most radical of all the chapters of ACORN. And these people are undermining the Constitution, undermining our national integrity. They're undermining the free enterprise system here in the United States. I mean, for gosh sakes, we had people who were on welfare getting mortgages. How can somebody on welfare qualify for a mortgage? I mean, what bank would give a person on welfare a mortgage? They were forced to do it. The government forced them to do this because the lawyers came after them. They were suing them. They were fining them. They were accusing them, ostracizing them, accusing them of redlining if they didn't do this. This is what caused this problem. Big government caused this problem, intruding into our families, into our communities, into our lives. This is what's caused this problem. Congress is to blame. It's not Wall Street. It's not the bankers. They did what they know how to do, make money.
All right, here's what concerns me.
They turned the lemon into lemonade.
Here's what concerns me right now. They're going to vote some kind of a bailout
They probably will.
All right. Now, as soon as that happens, all this goes away. People start to forget again.
Oh no! When I said earlier that this is just one of many down payments. We're going to be looking at, there's a lot more money. I mean, people don't realize what extent this infects the entire system. And it's not just in America, it's in Europe as well. Because these instruments, you know, these credit default swaps and all these other things, derivatives, these are all over the world, and nobody knows what value to assign them. And that's why people are losing confidence in the system, because they don't know exactly what they're sitting on. But I think we're going to see a lot more banks go under because they got involved in these. There are some strong banks like Wells Fargo, which is, you know, the banks that stayed away from these toxic instruments
like a lot of
are going to survive and thrive.
Like a lot of the local banks, the small banks, the cooperative banks.
That's right, and exactly.
My bank over in West Roxbury, the Rosendale Cooperative, I mean, they're solid. They're solid. They're encouraging people now to take...
right. These are conservative institutions who know, you know, they have qualifications. You know, with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, It used to be that they required a 20% down payment.
Now, look, I only got a minute left. The district goes from where? Tell us.
Well, it runs from Brookline, Newton, runs down through Wellesley. I live in Norfolk, the little town of Norfolk, and down through Foxborough, Taunton, all the way down to the south coast, all the towns in between Fall River and Wareham. And 29 cities and towns. It's an interesting district. It takes you an hour and a half to drive from one end to the other. But if I have a little bit of time, I'd like to give out the campaign information, the website.
Go ahead, give it out.
Okay, great. You can reach us at sholleyforcongress.us. We have a great website. The guy who put it together does an outstanding job. You can send us a donation to Sholley for Congress, P.O. Box 76, Norfolk, Massachusetts, 02056. The telephone number, campaign number is 508-528-8420. Again, the website is sholleyforcongress.us. Please check out our website. Spread the word. We think it's time that the status quo must go. I hate to use the word change, but...
But you are for term limits.
I am for term limits. I promise that I will only serve 2 terms and then I will retire, unlike certain other people in Massachusetts' recent vintage.
Earl, good luck to you.
Jackie, it was my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me here. I enjoyed it.
Again.